I stood in the courtyard of my family's compound in Riyadh and watched my wife receive the first lash across her back because I found a Bible hidden inside her pillowcase. I gave the order myself. I stood with my arms folded and my jaw set, and I counted each strike out loud because I believed Allah demanded it. But by the 34th lash, something entered that courtyard that brought every man present to his knees. And the woman I had sentenced to 100 strikes stood up with not a single wound left on her body. Have you ever been so certain you were carrying out the will of God that you never considered you might be destroying the one person He sent to save you? My name is Nasser ibn Abdulaziz al-Mukhtar. I am 29 years old, and on November the 8th, 2020, I ordered the religious punishment of my wife, Princess Fatima bin Saleh, in our private courtyard in the Al-Shifa district of Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, because she had been secretly reading a Christian Bible for nearly a year. I had no idea that the God I claimed to serve was about to shatter everything I believed in a way so terrifying and so beautiful that I would never be the same man again. I was born into one of the lesser branches of Saudi royalty, but in my world, even a lesser branch carries a weight most people cannot imagine. My father, Prince Abdulaziz al-Mukhtar, served as a religious affairs advisor within the royal court. He was not the wealthiest man in the kingdom, but he was among the most respected. His word on matters of Islamic law carried the force of a ruling. Our home in the Al-Shifa district sat behind limestone walls 12 feet high, with a private mosque built into the east wing. The adhan echoed through our hallways 5 times a day, not from a distant minaret, but from our own muezzin, a man named Abu Salim, who had served the family since before I was born. My mother, Hessa, wore full niqab even inside the compound when any male staff were present. She led Quran study circles for the women of our extended family every Thursday afternoon. While other boys my age played football in the streets of Riyadh or spent hours on video games imported from Japan, I sat on the carpet of our private mosque and memorized the Quran under the supervision of Sheikh Hamad, a scholar my father had hired specifically for my education. By the age of 15, I had memorized the entire Quran, every surah, every ayah. I never missed a single prayer, not when I was sick with a fever that kept me in bed for a week, not during family vacations to Marbella or Geneva, not even the morning my younger brother was rushed to hospital after a car accident. The elders at our mosque would place their hands on my shoulders and tell my father, Allah has blessed the house of Al-Mukhtar with a righteous son. My father also taught me from the earliest age that Christianity was the greatest deception ever inflicted upon humanity. He said Christians had taken a noble prophet named Isa and twisted him into a false god. He said they practiced shirk, the unforgivable sin, by worshipping a man as if he were Allah. He told me that Christian missionaries were the most dangerous people in the kingdom because they came with smiles and medicine and schools, but their real mission was to poison Muslim souls. By the time I was 18, I had joined a network of young men from prominent families who worked quietly with the Mutaween, the religious police, to identify foreign workers suspected of holding secret prayer meetings or distributing Christian materials. I reported Filipino nurses, Indian laborers, Ethiopian housemaids. I had Bibles confiscated. I had workers deported. I felt nothing but pride each time. The night everything changed began with something so small, I almost missed it. I had come home late from a meeting with a property developer in Jeddah. The house was quiet. Fatima was already in bed. I walked into our bedroom to find her asleep with the lamp still on. As I reached over to switch it off, I noticed the edge of something tucked beneath her pillow. I pulled it out. It was a small book, bound in dark brown leather, with no markings on the cover. I opened it. The pages were thin, the text printed in Arabic and English on facing pages. I recognized the word Injil, the Gospel. Then I saw the name Yasu repeated across paragraph after paragraph. Jesus. It was a Bible, a Christian Bible, hidden in the bed of a Saudi princess. My hands began to shake. Not with fear, with a rage so pure and sudden it felt like fire moving through my veins. I woke Fatima by throwing the book against the wall. She sat up and the look on her face told me everything. She was not surprised. She was not confused. She knew exactly what I had found. I demanded to know where it came from. She told me a Filipina nurse at her private clinic had given it to her 7 months ago. She told me she had been reading it every night after I fell asleep. She told me she had found something in those pages that she had never found in all her years of prayer. A love so personal and so unconditional that it had changed the way she understood God. The words coming out of her mouth sounded like madness to me. I had no idea that those words were the most dangerous and the most truthful things anyone had ever spoken in that house. I did not sleep that night. I sat in my study and called Sheikh Rashid, my father's closest advisor on religious matters. I told him what I had found. His response was immediate and absolute. A Muslim woman who reads the Christian Bible in secret and speaks of its God with affection has committed an act of apostasy. She must be corrected. In the kingdom, correction meant punishment. Sheikh Rashid recommended 100 lashes administered privately within the family compound, followed by a period of isolation and re-education under the guidance of a female scholar. I agreed without hesitation. I believed with every fiber of my being that I was protecting my wife's soul. I believed Allah not only approved but required this of me. I felt completely certain. I had zero doubt. I had no idea that the Jesus my wife had been secretly reading about was preparing to reveal himself in a way so powerful that my entire understanding of God would shatter in a single afternoon. The next morning, I made the arrangements. I brought in 2 men from our household guard, Mahmoud, a former military officer who had served our family for 9 years, and Bilal, a younger man trained in religious enforcement who had worked with the Mutaween. I also called my cousin Tariq, who was studying Islamic jurisprudence in Medina, and asked him to witness the proceedings to ensure they were conducted according to Sharia. Our plan was simple. Fatima would be brought to the inner courtyard after Dhuhr prayer. The lashes would be administered by Mahmoud. I would count them. Tariq would ensure compliance with religious protocol. It would be over within the hour. That night, I prayed Tahajjud at 3 in the morning. I asked Allah for strength and righteousness. I asked Him to purify my wife's heart and bring her back to Islam. But as I pressed my forehead to the prayer rug, I felt a strange heaviness in my chest, like a hand pressing down on my ribs from the inside. I dismissed it as stress, as sadness over what my wife had done to our family. I barely slept. Have you ever been so convinced you were defending the truth that you never questioned whether your actions were actually righteous? Fatima walked out between the 2 guards, wearing a plain white garment. Her hair was covered. Her feet were bare on the stone. She did not resist. She did not cry. She looked at me once, and I saw in her eyes the same expression I could not understand the night before. It was not fear. It was not anger. It was something deeper, something that looked almost like peace. She knelt on the ground in the center of the courtyard. The sun poured over her like a spotlight. I stood 6 meters away, arms crossed, jaw tight. Mahmoud took his position behind her. Bilal and Tariq stood to my left. I nodded. Mahmoud raised the leather strap. The first lash struck across her upper back. Fatima flinched but did not cry out. The second lash fell, then the third. I counted each one out loud. By the 10th, her garment showed a thin line of red. By the 20th, her body was trembling. Still she did not scream. Still she did not beg me to stop. What she did instead shook me to my core. The air split open. I do not know any other way to describe it. 1 second the courtyard was filled with desert heat and the sound of leather on skin. The next second, everything stopped. The strap in Mahmoud's hand froze mid-swing. His arm would not move. He looked at me with wide eyes and said, "I cannot move my hand." Then I felt it. A wave of heat that had nothing to do with the sun. It started in the center of my chest and spread outward through my arms, my legs, my fingers. It was not painful, it was overwhelming, like standing inside a furnace made of pure light. The temperature in the courtyard dropped and rose at the same time in a way that makes no sense but is exactly what I felt. Then I saw the light. It came from behind Fatima. A golden glow that started at her shoulders and spread outward until it covered her entire body. She was kneeling on the stone, bleeding, beaten, and she was glowing. I looked at her back. The wounds were closing. I watched the torn skin knit itself together, like fabric being sewn by invisible hands. The blood dried, the welts flattened. In less than 10 seconds, her back was smooth and whole, as though she had never been struck once. I fell to my knees. The stone hit my kneecap so hard I should have screamed, but I felt nothing except the heat and the light and something I had never experienced in 29 years of devoted Islamic practice. Love. Not the love I felt for my mother or my wife or my country. A love so vast and so personal at the same time that it felt like an ocean pouring into a cup. I was weeping. Tears poured down my face faster than I could breathe. I heard a voice, not with my ears, inside my chest, inside my bones. It said, "Nasser, why are you hurting what I love? She belongs to me, and so do you. I have been calling you since before you were born." I looked up and I saw him, standing behind Fatima with his hands on her shoulders, a figure made of light and solidity at the same time. His face was the most real thing I had ever seen. His eyes held no anger, only a grief so deep and a love so fierce that it broke me completely. I knew who he was without anyone telling me. It was Jesus. Not the dead prophet I had been taught about, not a character from a corrupted book, a living, radiant presence standing in the courtyard of a Saudi compound, healing the woman I had ordered beaten. Minutes could have been hours. Mahmoud was on his knees. Bilal had fallen backward against the wall and was sobbing with his hands over his face. Tariq was flat on the ground, forehead pressed to the stone, shaking. Khalid, the old servant, had come out of the doorway and was kneeling in the middle of the courtyard with her arms raised, whispering, Allahu Akbar, over and over, though I do not think she was speaking to the God we had always known. Fatima turned to me. Her face was radiant, calm, unmarked. She placed her hand on my cheek and said, He loves you, Nasser. He has been waiting for you your whole life. Ask yourself this question. How do you explain meeting the living God when everything you were ever taught told you he did not exist? I looked at Fatima through my tears and asked the only question I could form. What do I do? How do I follow him? She sat beside me on the courtyard stones and opened the same Bible I had thrown against a wall the night before. She read to me for over an hour. She told me about grace. She told me about a cross. She told me about a man named Saul who had persecuted the very people he would later die for. She said, what happened to me was not punishment, it was an invitation. Then she held my hands, the same hands that had signed her punishment order, and she led me in a prayer I will never forget. I said, Jesus, I have been wrong about you my entire life. I ordered the beating of the woman you sent to save me. I have hated your name. I have burned your word. But I saw you today. I know you are real. Forgive me for everything I have done. Save me. I surrender my life to you completely. When I opened my eyes, Mahmoud was kneeling beside me. He asked me to pray with him. Then Bilal. Then Tariq, still trembling, crawled over and said he wanted to say the same prayer. All 5 of us prayed together on the stones of that courtyard. I had no idea that the place where I had ordered my wife's blood to be spilled would become the place where I was reborn. I was baptized 4 months later in a hidden ceremony in Bahrain by a pastor who serves the underground church in the Gulf. I chose the name Daniel because, like the prophet, I had been thrown into a den meant to destroy me, and God had shut every mouth. The cost came swiftly and without mercy. I told my father that same week. I sat across from him in his office, beneath a framed verse of Ayatul Kursi, and told him that I had seen Jesus Christ with my own eyes and that I could no longer live as a Muslim. His face went rigid. The silence lasted nearly a full minute. Then his voice came, shaking with a rage I had never heard from him before. You are no longer my son. You are dead to this family. Your name will be removed from every document. You do not exist. My mother called me that night. She was weeping so violently I could barely understand her. She said one sentence and then the line went silent. You have destroyed us, Nasser. You have destroyed your mother. I have not heard her voice since that night. That was 4 years ago. My younger brother sent me a single text message the next day. It read, You are an apostate and a traitor. Do not contact this family again. Sheikh Rashid issued a private religious ruling declaring me outside the fold of Islam. Former friends held funeral prayers for me as though I had physically died. My name was erased from the family's business holdings within 2 weeks. We were given 72 hours to leave the compound. Fatima and I packed what we could carry. We fled first to Bahrain, then to a country in Europe I cannot name for our safety. Everything I believed was about to be shattered, and it was. I lost my family, my name, my country, my wealth, my identity. But I gained everything that truly matters. I gained Jesus Christ. I gained forgiveness for sins so dark I still cannot speak them all aloud. I gained a peace that has not left me for one single day since that afternoon in the courtyard. I gained a church family in Europe who took us in, who fed us, who wept with us, who loved us without conditions. And I gained the one thing no prince on earth can purchase: eternal life. Look inside your own heart right now and ask yourself whether the things you are clinging to are worth more than what God is offering you. Fatima and I renewed our vows in a Christian ceremony at St. Andrew's Anglican Church in the city where we now live. Pastor Thomas, who had walked with us through our darkest first year, officiated. Mahmoud, Bilal, and Tariq, the three men who had knelt with us on those courtyard stones, stood beside me as my groomsmen. Fatima wore a white dress, and when she walked toward me, I remembered the woman who had knelt barefoot on burning stone with a shredded back and whispered prayers of forgiveness for the man who put her there. I wept through the entire ceremony. Today I serve with an underground ministry that reaches Muslims across the Arabian Peninsula and North Africa with the gospel of Jesus Christ. We work through encrypted channels and trusted networks. I share my testimony with anyone willing to listen. Over 120 Muslims have given their lives to Christ after hearing what happened in that courtyard. Some of them were men like me, wealthy, powerful, certain they were righteous. I returned to Riyadh once, quietly, under a different identity. I walked past the compound. The limestone walls were the same. The palms had grown taller. I stood on the street and prayed for my father and mother and brother. I still send letters to my parents twice a year through a cousin I trust. I have never received a reply. My son Elias was born 2 years ago. The first sound he heard was not the adhan, but a hymn about the grace of Jesus. Fatima sings it to him every night. I tell him that his grandfather is a good man who loves God but does not yet know his name. I believe one day he will. I have to believe that. The prince who stood in that courtyard and counted lashes across his wife's back no longer exists. In his place stands a servant of Jesus Christ who would die before he ever denied the name that spoke to him between those limestone walls. If he can transform someone like me, a man who ordered the whipping of his own wife for reading a Bible, a man who believed his cruelty was worship, then he can absolutely transform you. No matter what you have done or where you come from, the same Jesus who walked into a Saudi courtyard and healed a woman's wounds and broke a prince's pride with nothing but his presence is standing before you right now through this very testimony. He is offering you the same love, the same forgiveness, the same new life that changed everything for me. Jesus is calling you right now. Do not wait for a golden light in a courtyard. He is already pursuing you. He has been pursuing you since before you opened this video. Will you let him in and discover the love that heals every wound and shatters every wall?